We are all alone, born alone, die alone, and in spite of true romance magazines, we shall all someday look back on our lives and see that, in spite of our company, we were all alone the whole way. I've been asking myself a lot lately, is it wrong to be happy alone? Surely it is better than being unhappy surrounded by people. Of course, I wasn't always in doubt. I was always happy alone and never felt guilty about it. It's people and their constant inquiries made me wonder if there was something inherently flawed in my choices. But fear not, doubts are not necessarily insecurities or weaknesses. It is the struggle against these doubts that makes a person reaffirm steadiness and stand by their choices. Maybe people wanted to understand me better. As if they just assume you're from space. Introverts often find that other people try to change them or even suggest something is wrong with them. While introverts make up a smaller portion of the population, there is no right or wrong personality type, except for when you are a dick. They would just label you as different and won't care anyways. What I learned is that people will always tell you this is the right way and this is the wrong way, when it's simply your way. And frankly, brother, I don't see how you can respect yourself if you must seek permission in others for your own happiness. There is, however, a subtle distinction between selfishness and self-interest. The former entails and goes beyond the latter. Selfishness is self-interest at the expense of others. Which is to say, I am a loner, but I fundamentally need others to coexist. I like to be useful to others every now and then, and am not living alone in the mountains, nor am I a contrarian. I just like to spend most of my time alone. My duty as an individual is to prevent myself from being overwhelmed by the pack, because at the end of the day, a man does what a man does because he wants something for himself. It's not a dramatization when experts say loneliness can have a profound impact on your health. The loneliness epidemic is a major concern and has been linked to high blood pressure, depression, heart disease, stroke, and more. One literature review even found that lacking a social connection can be more dangerous than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and deadlier than obesity. With that being said, please note, being alone is not your thing. Because you desire a specific connection with people, dare I say a permanent one, loneliness isn't about the quantity of your social interactions, but the quality and meaningfulness of those interactions. In contrast, being alone in a matter of choosing can be rewarding because it gives a person time to invest in themselves and their interests. People might choose to spend time alone because they are introverts, energized by the quiet. Others may prefer being alone because they feel overstimulated when around others. Enjoying time alone can be a consistent or stage-dependent preference. Do you prefer spending time alone? If so, you probably already know that there are some people who will stigmatize you for it. They think you are alone because you are anxious around other people and just don't have very positive relationships with humans. They assume you are lonely and depressed. But that won't matter because no price you pay is higher if you want to own yourself. Or as Nietzsche puts it, in loneliness, the lonely one eats himself. In a crowd, the many eat him. Now choose. Do you think that being alone has something to do with transcendence? What might philosophy have to say about social distancing? Here, it may be useful for us to reflect on Henry David Thoreau's experience, as described in his book Walden, 1954, which details his own time of self-isolation. Walden is a unique utopian narrative about simple living. Among other things, it was labeled a social experiment, a journey of spiritual discovery, a manual of self-reliance. Many different epithets have been attached to the work to describe it. Some also criticize it, that it was overly idealistic. Funny because it seems that it worked for the man just fine. One man's right is another man's wrong. In my opinion, it simply was Thoreau's way of life, as we all have to find that for ourselves, but I digress. We might at least say that it describes an application of transcendentalist philosophy. Nestled in the backwoods of Massachusetts, Walden teaches us to live intentionally and to find comfort in our own company, demonstrating how to embrace solitude as a virtue without succumbing to loneliness. Thoreau and his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson were the two most notable figures of transcendentalism. This was an intellectual movement early in the 19th century America, intent on positively rethinking contemporary society, transforming culture from unreflexive conformity to a purified individualism. It sprouted from English and German Romanticism and was arguably the first Western philosophy since the ancient Greeks. Nietzsche was ripe with transcendent criticism of philosophers of his time, save one, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the father of Transcendentalism. He loved Emerson. In 1984, Nietzsche in The Gay Science described Emerson's transcendental thoughts as being the richest ideas in the century. Like existentialism, transcendentalism was never systemized into a formal school of thought. But unlike existentialism, it propounded a somewhat naive optimism towards humanity. Transcendentalism's philosophical influence on other thinking is latent, if underappreciated. In 1845, Thoreau set out on a unique experiment in a self-built cabin near Walden Pond, on land owned by Emerson. Thoreau's ultimate purpose was to see if he could live a deliberate and fulfilling life with the mere essentials, shedding the unnecessary surplus of modern existence. A mile from any neighbor, living need not be complicated, according to Thoreau, and much unhappiness is wrought from the burdens of modern society. He writes, "Most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake are so occupied with the fictitious cares and superfluous coarse labor's life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them." The man's got a point. I wouldn't live in a cabin with no internet, but I wouldn't work in another man's company. Don't stress out too much in tax season. Thoreau writes, "My nearest neighbor is a mile distant, and no house is visible from any place but the hilltops within a half-mile of my own." He was not a natural hermit, though he found serenity in privacy. He didn't hate the world nor people, and he certainly didn't make his goal to avoid people, since he did receive visitors. "I had 3 chairs in my house, 1 for solitude, 2 for friendship, 3 for society." But isolation didn't bother Thoreau either. Indeed, isolation is such a compelling aspect of Thoreau's experience that he devotes an entire section in Walden to it, titled Solitude. Thoreau's answer to anyone who asked him how one could bear to be alone is simple. Nature attunes our minds to what really matters in life, and loneliness is a creation of our own misinformed mental diversions. Thoreau provides us with a kind of comforting perspective on loneliness by pointing out that no matter how hard we try, there will always be a chasm of consciousness between me and another person. What sort of space is that which separates a man from his fellows and makes him solitary? I have found that no exertion of the legs can bring 2 minds much nearer to one another. That's advice talk for reframing the crippling emotion of loneliness into self-fulfilling solitude. Thoreau and the Transcendentalists were known for their overflowing optimism. Whether practical or not, he wrote, "We are for the most part more lonely when we go abroad among men than when we stay in our chambers." It seems to me he had a fulfilling life despite everything. A thing we can learn from Walden during these unusual times is to live life deliberately. Thoreau offers essential tips, but unfortunately, none of them include instructions for building a cabin in the woods. But the one that caught my attention was to live deliberately. As I mentioned, Thoreau's ultimate purpose as described in Walden was to see if he could deliberately live a fulfilling life with the mere essentials, shedding the unnecessary surplus of modern life. Living need not be complicated if one lives deliberately. See what works for you in this life and stand by it no matter how crazy it is to the world. Of course, as long as it is in no one's expense. By a conscious effort of the mind, we can stand aloof from actions and their consequences, and all the things good and bad go by us like a torrent.